Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another Let's Read About the Presidents. We are doing Mr. Grant, General Grant. He was the 18th President of the United States. He was born on April 27, 1822, in Point Pleasant, Ohio. He died January 23rd, 1885, Mount McGregor, New York. Nickname Unconditional Surrender Grant. Hero of Appomattox. He was a Methodist. I like that. U.S. Military Academy, West Point, in 1853 was his education. He was a soldier. His military service includes quite a long list. Second Lieutenant, 1843. First Lieutenant, Mexican War. After the war, served in a variety of posts and rose to captain. Resigned in 1854. Served in the Civil War, appointed colonel of 21st Illinois Infantry, promoted to brigadier general. After his victory at Shiloh, Tennessee, he was promoted to major general. In March 1864, President Lincoln appointed him lieutenant general and commander of all Union armies. He was promoted to general of the army in July 1866. Grant was only the second man to hold this title. George Washington was the first. His father was Jesse Root Grant, interesting middle name there. His mother was Hannah Simpson Grant. His wife was Julia Boggs Dent Grant, married in 1848. His children were Frederick Dent Grant, Ulysses Simpson Grant the second, or junior, Ellen Wershaw, and Jesse Root. Jesse Root died in 1934. Political life, he was interim Secretary of State under President Andrew Johnson. Interim Secretary of State. Let's see what's there. Let's just get that. Interim Secretary of State. Oh, no, it's not added. Huh. It's not listed there. President Grant served 2 terms, March 4th, 1869 through March 4th, 1877. He was a Republican. He completed his terms in office. His vice presidents were Schuyler Colfax, and Henry Wilson. Henry Wilson died in office. In the election of 1868, the electoral vote was as follows. Hugh Grant, 214 electoral votes. Horatio Seymour, 80. It's pretty low. For the popular vote, Grant got 3,013,650 votes. Mr. Seymour got 2,708,744. In the election of 1872, Mr. Grant got 286. Horace Greeley, no. No votes at all. Grant got all the votes. But it says here Greeley had died after the popular election, but before the Electoral College vote. In the popular vote, Mr. Grant got 3,598,235, so almost 33.6 million votes. That's a lot. Mr. Greeley, in the popular vote only, got 2,834,761. Oh my Lord, look at this. Mr. Grant had a big cabinet. Okay, here we go. Secretary of State under President Grant. Elihu Washburn. Only for 9 days. Ouch. 9 days. 9 days as Secretary of State for Mr. Washburn. Hamilton Fish. There we go. That's better. Hamilton Fish, Secretary of State. Secretary of the Treasury, George S. Boutwell. William A. Richardson served right after him. And after Richardson was Mr. Benjamin Bristow. After Mr. Bristow was Lot M. Morrill, all as Secretary of the Treasury. Secretary of War, John A. Rawlins, who died in office. Ouch. William T. Sherman, for a month, maybe. After Mr. Sherman was William W. Belknap for 7 years. Alphonso Taft. It's probably related to William Howard Taft. Only for 2 months. After Mr. Taft, Alphonso Taft, was James D. Cameron as Secretary of War, Secretary of Defense nowadays, I think. Attorney General was Ebenezer R. Hoar, Hoar, for 6 months to a year. After Mr. Hoar was Amos T. Ackerman for a year, 6 months to a year. After Mr. Ackerman was George H. Williams for 3 years. After Williams was Edwards Pierre Pont for 6 months to a year. Alphonso Taft for a year. And Alphonso Taft served as AG and Secretary of War. Interesting. So he switched cabinets, I guess. Or President Grant did. Secretary of the Navy was Adolph E. Bory for 2 months, 1869. After Mr. Bory was George M. Robeson for, looks like 8 years there. Postmaster General was John A.J. Creswell. James W. Marshall for a month, 1874. Marshall Jewell for 2 years. James N. Tyner for 6 months to a year. So a lot of cabinet changes here. As for Secretary of the Interior, Jacob D. Cox for 6 months to a year. Columbus Delano for 5 years. And Zachary Chandler for 2 years. Supreme Court appointments under Grant. William Strong, 1870. Joseph P. Bradley, 1870. Ward Hunt. Ward, like in the Mormon Ward, but Ward, W-A-R-D, Hunt. And then Morrison R. Waite, with an E at the end, and Waite. Grant's real name was Hiram Ulysses Grant, which he detested. A clerical error later gave him the name he used for the rest of his life. Hiram Ulysses S. Grant. Battle of Chapultepec. Perched on a mountaintop on the west of the Mexico City sat Chapultepec Castle. This citadel was the scene of a vicious fighting between Americans and the Mexicanos. Since the castle was also the Mexican Military Academy, many of Chapultepec's defenders were its cadets, including boys as young as 13. After an artillery barrage on September 12, 1847, Americans advanced on the citadel at dawn the next day. And once the troops moved up the hill and gained a foothold. Mexican troops retreated to the city. 5 of the cadets refused to retreat and fought to the death. Another cadet, seeing he was the sole survivor of his group, wrapped the Mexican flag around himself and jumped off the cliff. They are remembered in Mexican history as Los Niños Heros, Herores, child heroes. Chronology of Grant's Civil War battles. In February 1862, captures Forts Henry and Fort Donelson in Tennessee. In April 1862, Wins Battle of Shiloh in Pittsburgh Landing, Tennessee. In May of 63, 11 months later, captures, no, April, May, a year and a month later, captures Jackson, Mississippi, and moves toward Vicksburg. In July 1863, Vicksburg surrenders after a 6-week siege. November 1863, Chattanooga, Tennessee falls after 2 months siege. May 1864, campaign in Virginia wilderness. And Spotsylvania. June 1864, costly Union victory at Cold Harbor, Virginia. June 1864, siege of Petersburg, Virginia. Backdoor to Richmond begins. March 65, Petersburg falls to Grant and Union Army. Also marches 1865 with fall of Richmond. April 1865, General Lee, Robert E. Lee, surrenders to Grant at Appomattox Courthouse, Virginia. All right. Population of the United States in 1869, 39,818,449. National debt in 1877 was 2,205,301,392. President's salary was $25,000 a year until 1873. Finally, the president gets a promotion, a paid upgrade, upgrade in pay, a hike in pay, whatever you want to call it. It went to $50,000. $50,000 a year. State added to the Union was Colorado in 1876, which makes it 38 states added to the Union. While president, Mr. Grant was ticketed for driving his horse too fast and fined $20. Ah, $20 in 1876. Or 1870s, whatever. $20, that's cheap today. You drive in a car too fast, you're looking at $200 to $2,000 today. Appomattox souvenirs. April 9th, 1865, the Wilmer McLean House of Appomattox Courthouse, Virginia, was assigned to the historic surrender General Robert E. Lee and his Confederate Army to General Grant. Following the signing of surrender terms by Lee, he and his staff departed, as did General Grant. Afterwards, some of the Union commanders who witnessed this historic occasion decided to acquire some souvenirs. General Ord paid $40 for the marble top table next to where Lee had sat. General Sheridan bought the wooden table used by Grant to draft surrender terms. Other officers appropriated smaller items in the drawing room, including chairs used by the two leaders and even the silent witness, a doll left by one of the McLean daughters. Wow. Grant established the first national park when he created Yellowstone in 1872. Did we know that Grant? Here we go. Did we know that Ulysses S. Grant is a cousin to later Presidents Franklin Delano Roosevelt and Grover Cleveland? Cousin. That's interesting. Did we know that Mr. Grant's habit of smoking 7 to 10 cigars daily led to his developing throat cancer? No duh. They should have known the effects of smoking back in those days. They should have known the effects of smoking 30, 40 years ago. They didn't know. Why don't they know? Whether it's little cigarettes or big cigars, it don't matter. You will kill yourself. Slowly, but you will kill yourself with smoking. Remember that. Grant's memoirs were completed a few weeks before his death and ultimately gave his family $450,000. That's a lot of money back in those days. A lot of money. Transcontinental Railroad, May 10th, 1869. At Promontory Point, Utah, the Union Pacific and Central Pacific Railroads met, joining the nation by the L. Fred Grant, Grant's eldest son, served as ambassador to Austria under President Benjamin Harrison and as the New York City Commissioner of Police. Cool. Good for him. Battle of the Little Bighorn, June 25th, 1876. Troops under the command of General George A. Custer attacked the camp of Sioux and Cheyenne Indians along Little Bighorn River in Montana. The Indians, under the command of Little Crazy Horse, retaliated, killing Custer and 265 men in his command. That's what you get. That's what you get for interfering in Indian territory. General Custer. Did we know Mr. Grant's funeral procession in 1885 was 7 miles long? As it wound through New York City, President Grover Cleveland led the procession, accompanied by Congress, the Supreme Court, his cabinet, and former Presidents Rutherford B. Hayes and Chester Arthur. The procession took over 5 hours to pass by 1.5 million people watching. 1.5 million people. Grant was buried in a temporary tomb in Riverside Park while his permanent resting place was designed and constructed. On April 27, 1897, President William McKinley presided over the dedication of Grant's tomb with Mrs. Julia Grant, her family, and thousands of others in attendance. All right. That's a long list of military service for Mr. Grant. And a long, big cabinet, too. A lot of turnover. So I hope you enjoyed that reading of Mr. Grant. Next will be Mr. Rutherford B. Hayes.